And welcome back to Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank. All right, guys, tonight I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. Bear with me. Got a little cough. Um, Had a procedure done today. Well, an MRI today, and I did a sedated, and so I'm a little still trying to wake up from the knockout juice, things of that nature. And I had to travel a distance to get it done because I live in a rural area. And so I'm just getting back behind the computer, and I have a friend of mine that texts me or yeah, text me an interview that Nick Fuentes did on Timothy Gordon's podcast. I guess they got together and they talked about a few issues. And I find it interesting because with both Gordon and Fuentes, I have a lot of agreement with, but I also have my disagreements with. With Fuentes, I think he has some really good political perceptions and observations and analysis. I think he's really good at times. Same time, the sharp racial stuff I don't go for. I'm not one who will sit here and say that we all have to be all perfectly pluralistic and champion diversity or anything like that. I don't believe in that at all. I think that's been terrible. I think highlighting differences between cultures and different ethnicities is very important. But the fine line on race, I struggle with Fuentes mainly because to me, those are Protestant principles, right? Those were the nature of sort of the Protestant founding of America and sort of the strict social, racial uh, lines that they created for themselves. Like E. Michael Jones says, the white boys on this island, and they all became effectively a bunch of racists. To a certain degree, that's true. It's true. And America having that origins and again, the British Anglo Empire adopted that in its early years. And so when Fuentes, who says he's a Catholic, starts going down this strict racial line of division between black and white and or white and everybody else. I just don't follow that. Now I've said before, I'm big on ethnicity and the importance of ethnicity and faith and religion, and that's where I believe our differences really lie more than it is color of skin. And so especially now that we're 200 and 50 years, 40 years, 50 years into this melting pot thing, I just don't know how you get the genie back in the bottle. And that's kind of the thing with Fuentes that I disagree with. But apart from that, he makes some interesting perceptions about life and politics and culture. Interesting. Timothy Gordon, I'm really the same way. I probably agree with Gordon 80, if not 90% of the time. He's Catholic. I believe in his ideas of patriarchy that he's pushing right now and things of that nature. There's a few things I disagree with him on. One of them is his book, Catholic Republic. And I got to admit, I haven't read the book, okay? But I have heard him talk about it quite a bit on his cast and other interviews that he's done, things of that nature. And where I disagree with Gordon is this fine line at the Civil War and what happened with the 14th Amendment. And for Gordon, he distinguishes himself from other Catholic philosophers like Patrick Deneen that favor the 14th Amendment because what happens when the states get out of whack and all of a sudden now you need to imply the moral law to bring order back to the states. Gordon, big time into subsidiarity. The states have complete autonomy. That kind of an argument, right? And so in this discussion interview that Fuentes and Gordon were having, lots of great stuff, right? Patriarchy, masculinity, things that guys are important to guys, things that have been lost in our uh, feminized liberal culture, the role of women and how honestly femininity or feminism, I should say, has screwed up a lot of things. Men have retreated in many ways, and our culture has become completely morally debased, being led by women in many ways, because the natural roles or the inherent roles given to us by God have been flipped. It was a great discussion, but then, of course, invariably they got into the area of the Constitution and the Civil War and and constitutional law, which is Timothy Gordon's forte. I think that's what he studied in college, if I remember correctly. And again, I respect Mr. Gordon. Don't get me wrong, but this is where I have one of my disagreements with him, and maybe I'm misunderstanding him. I will say that because I haven't read his book. I can only react to the things I've seen on his podcast and things of that nature and other interviews he's done. But his position is if I hope I'm representing this correct, that America was founded as a crypto Catholic nation based upon I forgot which number article of the Magna Carta, which was a Catholic document. He links it back to the Augsburg Confession, which was a decree by a pope during the time of the wars of the Reformation, where that particular pope said, okay, listen, we got to keep the peace here. Here's how we're going to do it, right? If you're in a territory where you have a Catholic prince, then you're a Catholic nation. If you're, if you have a Protestant prince, then you're a Protestant nation. Let's stop fighting these wars. It was some type of a grand accommodation that the Pope made at the time, in order to stop the wars from going on. Extrapolate that back again to the Magna Carta, which was a Catholic document, formation of government, the three branches, things of that nature. Hence, when we get to the founding of America, this document is implied or put together there as part of the founding of the nation, with the different branches of government and the subsidiarity, the local states, the localism, things of that nature. And hence he believes that at the origin there, at some point, this was Catholic in origin. Okay, now, okay, that's fine. I get where listen. I'm roughshotting through his theory. Okay, again, just based generally on what I've heard. And so if I misrepresent anything, I apologize. I'm doing the best I can by memory because I'm trying to get to the ultimate point, which is the Civil War era. Okay. So America operates as this confederation of sorts of loosely banded together little republics or states, if you want to call them that. You got the Articles of Confederation. Well, that wasn't really strong enough, apparently, to keep the whole thing together. So then you got to come up with the Constitution of the United States, and from there you got this divine document that's given to us. Apparently, all these Protestants, again, they're all Protestants or they're all Freemasons. Very few Catholics there in play. I think there was one of the signers of the Constitution was Catholic, if I remember correctly. But I don't know. Somehow, all these Freemasons and Protestants, Calvinists, Presbyterian types, they all come together and really decide to put together this great crypto Catholic republic. Okay? All right, fine. I don't want to rehash the history or hash out the history of the Magna Carta, the Augsburg Confession, and how they came to this conclusion, right? We'll deal with that another time. But in this interview with Fuentes, right, there's a respectful disagreement, and I will admit they don't get too deep into it. But Gordon goes into his thing about, well, listen, 14th Amendment screwed everything up, right? 14th Amendment is what allowed states not to be able to ban certain issues like contraception or abortion, things of that nature. And then he says guys like Patrick Deneen, who's out of Notre Dame, he's a guy that believes in the 14th Amendment. Says, yeah, see, these are liberal Catholics, right? Is what they really are. When you're arguing for big government, because that's what the 14th Amendment is. Okay, fine. But there's some pushback to that, as I told you with Gordon before. Go back on the other side, Nick Fuentes says, listen, I like Lincoln. And the reason why I like him is because he made America into America. And so, yeah, we were all these loosely put together territories. What were we? What was America at the time? Kind of a thing. And I would have loved for these two gentlemen to kind of get into as to, their differences of opinions, but they didn't. They moved on. But this is what I'll address, right? With Gordon, here's the thing, is that it always stops at the 14th Amendment for him. And as he said so many times, it's like, listen, the 14th Amendment ruined everything. It basically outlawed the state churches. And the moment you outlaw the state churches, here comes all the moral depravity. Here comes the government in to take control. The feds now are telling the states how to govern their lives. And it's 14th Amendment was a gateway to big government. And in many respects, it's true. But here's the issue. And as I said before, and this is the problem that many classical liberals fall into. They don't deal with anything outside the political realm. They don't understand faith. Now, Mr. Gordon does understand faith, okay? I'll give him that. But this is really your typical U.S. Constitution technocratic argument that's being put in place as politics as a means to an end. I don't see it that way, okay? Because while the 14th Amendment is problematic, my question always is, okay, Tim, with all due respect, I agree with you. How do we solve it now? Well, Tim's answer is, well, it's too late now. Screw it. Let's all pack it up, move to a red state, let the whole thing collapse. Well, wait a minute, Tim. Fine, but did America ever really exist, I guess is my question. If you want to take a pre-industrial revolution, and again, this is where conservatives always lose at the end of the day. I'm not saying Mr. Gordon is conservative, but these are the arguments. It's really, I believe civilization is defined by certain key moments in time. You have the pre-industrial revolution America and the post-industrial revolution America. The pre-industrial revolution America, I think, for Mr. Gordon's ideas, it works fine. But the moment we get to post-industrialization, we get mechanization of everything. We get, advanced travel, more advanced communication. The world is moving on. The world becomes a lot smaller. And now you're reacting to modern events and modern times and modern trends. Not to mention, throughout that same period from the end of the 1800s or 18th century, all the way through the 20th century, you got something called the French Revolution that is sweeping all of the globe, primarily Europe, and eventually filters into America and all of its moral depravities, and how that affects not only trends, morality, cultures, and society, but how it affects politics. And this is where a lot of this is lost oftentimes. Because you can sit here and tell me, listen, 14th Amendment ruined everything. Okay, fine. Now what? Well, the whole thing, well, it's too late. It all collapsed. Wait a minute. We're people that have hopes and dreams and aspirations, right? As Catholics, we're told that doctrinally, at least, that the gates of hell will never prevail against our church. That there's something bigger, something better than us here in this world. That God is always watching out after us. The question now remains is, if we're going to draw this fine line on these ideas of subsidiarity, how do we fix it? How do we govern civilization? The problem is with mechanization, advanced travel, communication, going into a much more technologically advanced world, you were going to start to have issues that you were going to deal with. And one of those issues, whether you like it or not, was government was going to be able to grow its reach. Government was going to advance with that technology and that ability to communicate and its lust and desire for power. And this is where we get to the essence of democracy. And I don't want to hear about the republic versus democracy thing. It's the same crap. I'm sorry. It really doesn't matter. Okay? Eventually, it's liberalism, and it all gravitates toward bigger government at the end of the day. That's what it is. There's no way to control this animal unless society is fundamentally built different, particularly with the monarch and the aristocracy and things of that nature, where the church is in place that does a lot of the functions of what the government now does, the church used to do. Civilization was built different. Apart from the technological advancements, you had simply smaller communities that depended on themselves. But with the advancement of technology, the advancement of modern political theories, the morality that's beginning to run roughshod through the European and the Americas here, everything is changing at a very rapid pace. And trying to maintain a political order from a more agricultural, a more agrarian society to a much more technologically advanced metropolitan style sort of society now, those are two different worlds. Two different worlds. See, this is why by the time we get to the first half of the 20th century, this is why Catholic fascism rises in Europe. And yes, while the church does believe that subsidiarity is the highest ideal, the question is not so much, are we going back to those ideals of subsidiarity? The question is, what's possible in politics? And what wasn't possible in Europe, at least, and eventually America, was this idea of localization, of the small government state. It was all being wiped out through these radical leftist unifications. And good luck trying to stop that. Now you may say, well, yeah, we got to fight against that and keep everything local. Yeah, but good luck. Good luck trying to do that. This is why we go in the Catholic Church, bear in mind here, from a Pope Pius IX, who in the 60s, 70s, right around there, was arguing against Italian unification when Garibaldi was coming up the southern boot. He's desperately writing, condemning this thing, saying localization, subsidiarity. And technically, the Pope was right. I'm not questioning that he wasn't right. But guess what? The Pope didn't have an army to stop Garibaldi. He didn't have an army. Listen, I'm watching a movie right now, a series on Netflix. I'm pleasantly surprised. Now, granted, it's Netflix. You got to be careful with it. I get it. Creative liberties, all that stuff. And it's dubbed in Italian. And, Italians, we have our nudity and, our you know what I mean. Italian TV. Anyways, and it's a story of one of the Sicilian princes called the Leopard. Name of the series, the Leopard. And here comes Garibaldi, who invades Sicily. Now, Garibaldi landed in Marsala, Sicily, the port of Marsala. That was my father's hometown. Okay, he lands there 1860, 1 year before the American Civil War started, right? So he lands in Sicily, and the prince, who kind of has a good lifestyle, owns a lot of land, right? He's one of the aristocratic classes, things of that nature, has a lot of pull, society, lots of service. He's got a problem. He likes their way of life in Sicily. He doesn't necessarily want a unification of it. He doesn't want Garibaldi there. And so he originally starts to oppose this. Now, I'm only 2 episodes in. I got to be honest with you. And my suspicion is, as I watch this, he's going to have to cave in, because that's what happens when you lose militarily. That's the reality of life, right? But anyways, you already start to see some of the compromises that he starts making. Even though he doesn't want Garibaldi there, he starts accepting reality. That there's nobody on the Sicilian island or the Italian peninsula that's going to stop this guy. Garibaldi's a brilliant, military leader. He's got his men, and eventually he will conquer the entire Italian peninsula. Right? Eventually surrounding Rome, surrounding the Pope. The Pope would become, as he was a prisoner inside the Vatican, and that question became the question Romana between the new Italian government, with a left of center king appointed by Garibaldi and ultimately the Catholic culture in Italy. And this question will not be settled until Mussolini comes around, some call it 60 years later, roughly, with a question Romana. And this is how we get the Latin accords in the church. But the point of it all here is, again, what do you do in a situation where you've lost militarily? The South tried to keep its independence and lost militarily. And as a result, 3 years later, I believe is what it was, we get the 14th Amendment. Now what? Now what do? You do get the 14th Amendment. This is why guys like Patrick Deneen would say, well, listen, at this point, we got to embrace the 14th Amendment and use it for our own means. Gordon would say, well, wait a minute, but 14th Amendment is what caused these problems. We got to go back to pre-14th Amendment. Okay, but are you going to fight another civil war over it, Tim? I mean, that's what the Civil War was at the end of the day. And so, okay, and it goes back to, again, right, after the Obergefell decision, after Roe v. Wade was shut down by the Supreme Court, everybody celebrated, everybody was happy, right? Woo! Roe v. Wade has been overturned. And as I've been telling you guys for years, even before that decision came down, then what? Is the state's argument really the most effective argument we can have as Catholics? Because the moment you go down to the states, what do you do at the blue state level? Nothing. And what happens even worse, when red states start voting in abortion, then what? Then what do you do? And this happened in Ohio, exactly like what, a year after, 2 years after the Obergefell decision, where a red state that voted for Donald Trump, that put Republicans in, enshrined in their state constitution the right for women to kill their babies. Now what, Tim? And this is what I told you. I'm watching an episode of his brother's podcast, Dave Gordon. After that vote came down, he was frustrated, rightfully so. We were all frustrated to see a red state, a Republican state, enshrine abortion into their constitution. He said, well, what do we do now? He goes, I'm in favor of subsidiarity, but our only choice, I guess, now is the federal government. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Dave. I agree. I think that's what Patrick Deneen is arguing too, if I'm not mistaken. The question is, how do you govern outside your little perfect theoretical philosophical paradigm? That's the question a lot of people are asking. And the answer for me isn't, okay, well, it's over. Let's all surrender, move to a red state. Well, how long before that moves to your red state? Oh, that moral depravity. I'm from California too, just like Tim Gordon is. I now live in the red state. We're seeing stuff in red states. Granted, it's much slower, but it's entering here. We're a secular society. We're not in Christendom anymore. This stuff is spreading all over the place. Running to a red state is not the answer for you, Tim, and it's definitely not the answer for your kids. So this is just kind of my basic issue here. It's just like, it's a respectful disagreement I have with Tim. Again, I agree with him probably 90% of the time. I think he's a good fellow Catholic. I agree with it. But again, we have to think about the practical effects of governance at the same time. I don't want to be told, okay, 14th Amendment in 1868, well, it's over. It's over. Was America ever a country? Were we ever anything other than a bunch of loosely put together territories, right? Where many of the states weren't even states yet. I mean, you're going back to pre-industrial revolution for the most part. Yeah, that constitution maybe worked under those, constructs, possibly. I'm not sure that it did. I got to be honest with you. That whole religious liberty thing kind of leads to the proliferation of all these kooky heresies all over the place. And now we got, America is a laughing stock of faith and religion. as we just make it up. Everybody's their own pope here, concocting those kooky of religions, Tim. And I just don't think you can discount the fact that these were all Protestants too at the same time, and most of them were Freemasons. Got to consider that. But how did now? Again, let's fast forward past the 14th Amendment, and as the entire Western world is being consumed by liberalism, right? Liberalism of America, but even more so the liberalism of the French Revolution. With its moral depravity, you got the rise of, again, you go from John Locke, right, to Marx and all these philosophers that were moving progressively to the left here throughout the entire Western world. What do we do now? What do we do? Because at the end of the day, politics is about power. It is. You can sit here like the conservators. Oh, we got to fight and win the battle arena of ideas. The right in America has been getting their asses to them in the battle arena of ideas since I was born. Since I started following politics, they've been getting their asses handed to them. Don't tell me about fighting and winning in the battle arena of ideas. Politics is about power. The left understands this, and this is why they've beat conservatives and Christians and Catholics to the ground who don't want to acknowledge this problem. Yes, we need basic foundational principles of laws and governance, things of that nature. But when push comes to shove, if you don't have the power to enforce your laws, your ideas, your political theories, they don't mean jack. And this is why, again, as I pointed out to you before, the reign of Benito Mussolini in Italy was very critical because it showed how the church had to be malleable at that time. While Pope Pius IX is arguing for subsidiarity, Pope Pius XI is reading the writing on the wall and saying, okay, I got to cut a deal with Mussolini. I do. And Mussolini wasn't exactly a subsidiarity guy. He wasn't a central planner. He didn't collectivize. He was a protectionist. But because fascism, as Patrick Peters argued on this cast last week, and I'm going to bring Patrick Peters back, the author of the book Botched Victory, How World War II Caused Vatican II and Corrupted the Christian West. What they realized was this is a different world. And how do we Catholics govern ourselves and protect ourselves from these leftist revolutions that have been sweeping the West for 140 years, 130 years at that point? And the popes, Pope Pius XI, saw something in Italian fascism. I know this is anathema to a lot of Americans, right? Because fascism is tyranny. I get it. It goes against our democratic values or sensibilities. I get it. But the Pope was not arguing subsidiarity per se. Now, Mussolini had the foresight to see how a nation could be best governed. This is why when he evolved from, again, Marxism to fascism, is a totally different philosophy. And as an organic movement, as Patrick Peters said, they understood that each region of Italy was different and it needed, to a certain degree, its own autonomy. That's why fascists did believe in certain concepts of subsidiarity, especially when it came to the economy. Now, yes, they kept the usury bankers out. They did. They definitely kept the internationalist Marxists out of there. But this is where government is needed to protect the culture and the local districts from greater influences that they have no control over anymore. Did Pope Pius XI condemn Mussolini because he took a more centralized path in the governance of Italy? No. He actually praised him as a man sent by divine providence. He gave the church back its glory in Latin accord. Mussolini understood true divisions of power. Something in America we've never really understood. You could take an abstract document like the Constitution and say, okay, 3 justice tier, Supreme Court, this, that. Okay, this is how we separate powers. But the true power is in the moral law first and foremost. None of these things about, okay, the Supreme Court, the executive, and the judicial, and the executive, and then we got the 50 states, and, 2 senators. None of that matters if the moral law is jacked up from the beginning. None of it matters, because you're not going to have a small government, a subsidiarity government, if the moral law is screwed up. This is the problem with Catholic Republic. And this is what Pope Pius XI saw in Mussolini. Mussolini understood. And he gave the church its own purview. Is that a word? Am I using that word right? I'm not the smartest guy in the world. But he gave the church its own rightful place. And yes, at times they butted heads, but they always worked it out. See? Mussolini recognized the natural law. And he even went against fascist orthodoxy because he understood you can't railroad a people and govern them by railroading them. Of course, he also loved Italy. He loved Italians. Even my last guest, again, Patrick Peters, said one of the critiques of Mussolini by Joseph Goebbels, right, the top propaganda minister of the Nazis, was that he loved his Italian people too much. Too much. Like, that's a bad quality? Really? But listen, this is not a Mussolini cast, okay? My point is that Pope Pius XI was malleable in terms of governance. He was. He worked with Mussolini. And again, as Patrick Peters said, Italian fascism turned out to be the greatest political theory, modern political theory, that ever conformed to Catholic social teaching. And while there is great dangers in fascism, I will be the first to acknowledge what is the succession process? Who replaces Mussolini at some point? I don't know. Get a nut job in there. Absolutely. It's always a problem, but it's not like democracy is great at succession process anyways. I mean, look at the whack jobs we get in these liberal governments. So this is my issue with Mr. Gordon. It's like, listen, Tim, I agree with you, but how do we adapt in an ever-changing world? Simply throw your hands up in the air and say, oh, it's over, pack it up. But that's not governance. Doesn't mean anything. To take a few abstract ideas from a pre-industrial age, a massively agricultural society at the time compared to today, and say, we got to go back to that standard. Most people don't even own land anymore now. It's all been monopolized by the bankers, by the usury system, by the manipulation of money. That old world that you talk about, it required land. And America at the time had a lot of it. In fact, had so much of it, the government was giving away to try and populate the West. Totally different world before the Civil War. So, I don't know, guys. I mean, these are just my general thoughts. I would love to hear Nick Fuentes' take on the Lincoln thing. I'm not an expert on the Civil War. I'll be the first to tell you. I did find it interesting about the Civil War that it was Jefferson Davis corresponding with Pope Pius IX, right? I think Pope Pius IX sent him a crown of thorns that he made for Jefferson Davis. And you can understand at the time, these two men had a common cause. They both wanted to keep that old world of subsidiarity. You get it, right? And in the end, both men lost in the realm of politics and in the realm of reality. They both lost together. I think if you go to the Jefferson Davis Museum, I've never been there. I've never been to the South, but um, there's still a rosary that hangs in his museum that I believe that the Pope sent him as well as a crown of thorns. You could understand the two men's cause, and I agree with it. Would have been a much better world to keep it locally with smaller, small states. I agree with that. It's not a point of disagreement. The point is, how do we move on from this? How do we deal with this now? And the irony of it all was, from my understanding, I saw the letter once. Abraham Lincoln was corresponding with Garibaldi. Oh, and Karl Marx, by the way. Karl Marx. That's interesting, right? I don't know what it means, but it's interesting. I think Lincoln wanted Garibaldi to lead one of his armies after he had won the Italian Revolution and unified Italy. But Lincoln would only give him charge of one army. And Garibaldi said, no, I want all of them. And so Lincoln didn't want to go down that path. So it's just interesting that we have, and again, I don't know what to think of it. This is not my area of expertise, but it's interesting, what's considered one of the great presidencies in the history of the country. You have, in one of its most difficult times, obviously, maybe its most difficult moment in history, the survival of what we call the United States of America. You have Abraham Lincoln communicating with Karl Marx and Garibaldi, two men of the left of center position. In the case of Marx, of course, very left of center position. I think there's something deeper there that we've never been taught. I'm sure, I suspect Freemasonry is probably involved there, most likely. But I would love to hear Fuentes' view on that. Just I haven't heard his view on it. I think that would be fascinating. In that part of history. And listen, I agree with, just to end up, I agree with Gordon. The ideals of subsidiarity are the best, and I believe in them. What's going on right now with Trump, and at least what I'm hearing, I don't know what I believe, to be honest, what's coming out of DC. I have my distrust of everything right now. But in theory, the abolishment of the Department of Education, I say hoorah to that. Right on. It's about time. Bringing things back down to local governments, I think, is the best way to go. Lowering taxes, all that stuff, without a doubt. And I guess the other point of contention I would have with Mr. Gordon, that the idea of the state church, right? I should have brought this up earlier, but the idea of the state church too, the Protestant state church. See, I guess the biggest problem I have, is I talked about the lack of the moral law in America from the very beginning. Because we Catholics have a universal principle of governance. We're not located as, as an individual, as an individual entity. We don't see ourselves as one of all these churches, all these denominations. We are the one that's Catholics. Number one, it's the church Jesus Christ established on Peter. And we have a 2,000-year analogy of the faith that goes all the way back to Christ. No other church can claim that. And the authority the church has comes directly from Christ, not from a biblical interpretation, a subjective biblical interpretation. It actually comes through history, through a series of, again, what do you call it? Ancestral roots that links us all the way back. So when we go through the Reformation, ironically enough, it's the Protestants that come up with the idea of the state church, the state church. The state church is not a Catholic principle. Never was, really. You can say, okay, Maryland was Catholic. Okay, I get it. They landed there. Catholics are looking for a territory. But generally, that's not how the Catholic world worked. State church was created by King Henry because the Pope wouldn't give him validate his divorce. And the Protestants come here because what is the American founding? Let's be honest here. It's a bunch of Protestants that are arguing over their personal interpretation of Scripture, and they spill over into America so they can all get away from each other instead of killing each other. And this is why the Constitution is put in place, so Protestants wouldn't be killing themselves, each other. And each state had a state church. But as Catholics, we don't believe in the concept of state church. We have a universal church. Always have. And so when you have something called the United States Constitution, to whatever degree you believe it's supposed to be applied, how much government is supposed to be involved? Okay? This much government, this little government, more government, less government, I don't know. The fact is that that Constitution never overtly even proclaimed Christ as the head of the nation. It never says his name, apart from a date at the bottom, the year of our Lord. Oh, okay, big deal. It uses Masonic language. The Grand Architect, that's Masonic language. And this is not to knock America. Listen, America is the land of my birth. It's the land I raised a family in. It's the land I'm going to die in and be buried in. But I just want to be honest about what America was. Because with all of the great gifts that America has given us, it's had a lot of faults. And without the moral law of the Catholic Church, the universal moral law of the Catholic Church, America has been on a leftward trajectory since the founding. Timothy Gordon picks the 14th Amendment. Fair enough. I can see why, and I can agree with it. But the fact is, the leftward trajectory picks up as the Industrial Revolution kicks off. This is the advancement of our times that I keep talking about. Because the leftist trajectory that America was founded on by Protestants and Freemasons, because it's slower in an agricultural society, it only reflects the fact that it was an agricultural society. Most agricultural societies are very slow, right? But we do get to the mechanization of our society sometime in the mid-1800s. And with that, the politics has to take a leap forward, become more advanced, move at a faster pace. And this would allow secular governments, or should I say, collapsing Protestant state church governments, to eventually secularize and begin to grab more and more and more power. That's what happened. And this is something that has to be acknowledged, and most Americans don't get this. Most Catholics don't even get this. At some point, your thesis has to be applicable, right? I can't say that word, okay? Great to have political thesis. Great to know your Constitution. Hoorah, right on, number one. But at some point, you have to be able to apply. As I said earlier, politics and even governance is about power, whether we like it or not. And who can maintain that power and that control at the end of the day. And if you got a theory without being able to back it up, to support it, then your theory means nothing. And this is why when I hear, well, okay, 14th Amendment ruined it, let's all give up. Wait a minute. Did we ever have a country? You're telling me that America lasted from what? 1781 to 1861? What's that? 70 years? 80 years? We had America for 80 years. Is that a success story? And even that, it was pre-industrial revolution, primarily an industrial, or should I say, an agricultural society. America can only work under the strict, the strict definition or time in the history of sort of, the grand scale of history, I should say, right? But the moment we're not an agricultural society anymore, America can't survive. Then what good is your Constitution? What good is it? Listen, I understand what Gordon's saying. I do, and I respect it, and in large part, I do agree with it. But as you guys know, listen, I've evolved from this classical liberal, right-wing conservative thing that I used to believe in, and now I'm just a guy that believes in practical governance. I just believe in practical governance now. And yes, I have my ideas what's better. Yeah, I know our federal government's too big, too bloated, too strong. States need more power. And then the local communities at the city level or the town level, they need even more power too. I get it. I get it. I'm not disputing that. But how do you get that done? And if you don't get it done, how do you govern? State of Ohio, a red state, Republican state, said, yeah, a woman has the right to kill her baby. Now what? Oh, nothing we can do about it? Subsidiarity? You're telling me the government, federal government, if we get the right federal government, let's say we were to get eventually at some point a true Catholic government in DC. Let's say we get a trad Catholic that gets a good majority of the House and the Senate and Supreme Court. Can that Catholic go into a state like Ohio or New York, whatever, and say enough is enough? We're not murdering the unborn? My understanding, Catholic political structures is you go to the next highest authority when a great moral injustice is being done, when it contradicts the values of the church and of Christ our Lord. That's my understanding. You got to go to the next highest authority. We prefer not to go to the feds. I'll be the first to tell you. But when that's the only choice you've been left, then what? See? Ohio, I think, actually ruined Tim's arguments. And I say that with all due respect to Tim. I like Tim. But I think, again, as the Catholic fascist nations figured out, as we go into the World War I, World War II era, things are changing at a rapid pace politically. How are you going to survive at the end of the day? And it worked until this grand alliance between the Protestants and the Marxists. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. It's not to say I'm endorsing the Nazi regime. I'm not doing that. That's a whole nother discussion over there. But for the Italians and Pope Pius XI, that alliance worked. That relationship worked at the time because they saw Catholic civilization being overrun. They understood what was sweeping through society and culture in all of Europe. This is why even in Non abbiamo bisogno, right? The papal critique of fascism, right? It's not a condemnation. It wasn't a condemnation. It says so right in the document. The Pope was protecting his baby, Catholic Action. You can understand why he was protecting Catholic Action from the fascist regime. Catholic Action was seen as that organization at the time that was going to re-evangelize what was becoming a pagan culture in Europe post-French Revolution. Because the moral depravity of the French Revolution has spread throughout all of Europe, especially in the major cities. Catholic Action was going to be that organization within the church to try and have a counter-revolution against that leftism. Of course, what Pope Pius XI didn't realize, good Pope, as Patrick Peter says in his book, is that Catholic Action was infiltrated. And Mussolini understood this. Good popes make mistakes. Well, I don't want to say he made a mistake. I understand. It was his baby. I get it. I get it. But eventually, of course, they came to an agreement. They worked it out like they always did. Mussolini understood the nature of Catholicism in Italy. And this is why, toward the end of his life, he found his faith. So, again,
it's hard for me, with Tim because I like him. I think he's a good guy, man. I think he's genuine. I think he loves the faith. There's a few things, other things I disagree with him on, but generally he's right on. I think his battle against feminism and the fight for the patriarchy is wonderful. It's a beautiful fight. It needs to be done by more men because so many men have been neutered by liberal feminism in our time. I think it's wonderful. Um, I thought he destroyed Trent Horn in those two debates he had a few years back when it came to feminism and the gun issue or death penalty. I forgot which one it was now. I think the guy that I really is really struggling right now in the Catholic world is Trent Horn. He's been in a number of debates and taken a number of issues that are just bad. They're bad. Uh, the way the way he took on Tim Gordon didn't look good. Lost. Bad. E. Michael Jones, terrible, terrible on E. Michael Jones. I think he went after Candace as well, too. Just a bad look for Trent Horn. He's really getting his butt handed. And I like Trent. He's a great Catholic apologist. And when he stays within that, that area of Catholic apologetics dealing with Protestants, he's excellent. He's excellent. It's when Trent gets into that politics and culture area that he gets into a lot of problems. But listen, guys, I have my disagreements with all these men, but I do have respect for all of them as well, too. And so there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Just a little take on this podcast that I saw tonight. I'll see if I can leave a link. Again, anytime you're dealing with Nick Fuentes, this stuff is banned everywhere, which should be a red flag for everybody. I got it over on X. I'll put the link in the description box here. I think you'll find it interesting. It's a great conversation. I like both these gentlemen. Have my disagreements, but I like both these gentlemen. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. This is Frank signing off for Frankly Speaking. Good night, everybody.